The lights were merciless that night, flooding the stage in a glow that made every movement, every flicker of expression, impossible to miss. Cameras lined the walls, their red eyes fixed on the two figures at center stage. The crowd buzzed with anticipation, a mixture of applause, murmurs, and the restless energy of people who knew they were about to witness more than policy points. They were about to watch a clash. Karoline Leavitt wasted no time. With the confidence of someone who had rehearsed this moment 100 times, she leaned toward the microphone, her voice sharp and unyielding. The words she chose were not crafted for dialogue. They were crafted for dominance. A cutting insult, calculated to slice through Kash Patel's calm demeanor, rang out across the stage. It was meant not only to belittle him, but to define him, in front of millions watching from home. The jab landed with precision, and for a split second the audience froze. Then came the audible gasp, a sound that rippled through the hall like a wave. Commentators at the press table leaned in instinctively, pens pausing mid-scratch, eyes narrowing as if to make sure they had heard correctly. Even those who expected fireworks that night were caught off guard by the sharpness of the blow. Leavitt smirked, convinced she had seized the upper hand. She thrived on moments like this, the sting of humiliation, the public gasp, the sense that her words had shifted the ground beneath her opponent's feet. To her, the silence that followed was confirmation of victory. But in that silence, something else was happening. Patel did not flinch. He did not rush to defend himself. He stood steady, absorbing the weight of the insult without breaking stride, without surrendering to the trap of outrage. His stillness was louder than her words, and though few realized it yet, the dynamic had begun to change. The tension in the hall thickened, almost unbearable, as cameras tightened their focus on Patel's face. The audience leaned forward, waiting, breathless. But no one was ready for what Patel would say next. The debate was never just another entry in the endless carousel of political theater. It was unfolding in a moment when America's nerves were raw, when the country seemed perched on the edge of something larger than policy disputes. The political climate was heavy with division, the air thick with spin. Every word spoken on that stage wasn't simply a remark. It was ammunition in a broader war for credibility, for control of the narrative, for the very story America would tell itself about who it was becoming. The media had already primed the audience. Headlines painted the night as a showdown of style versus substance, personality versus principle. Clips of Karoline Leavitt's sharp retorts from past debates circulated widely in the days leading up to the event, framing her as the unstoppable force, the confident performer whose smirk alone could rattle opponents. The message was clear. She was expected to dominate. She had turned debates into viral theater before, and pundits predicted she would do it again. But beneath the spectacle, there was more at stake. For Kash Patel, this was not about applause lines or sound bites. It was about integrity. It was about the truth. In an environment where noise too often drowned out meaning, Patel represented something quieter, steadier, the belief that facts, service, and dignity still had a place in public life. For many watching, the confrontation wasn't simply Leavitt versus Patel. It was arrogance versus dignity. It was arrogance dressed up as cleverness, testing whether calm truth could still resonate in a climate addicted to outrage. And it mattered because audiences weren't just looking to see who could land the sharper insult. They were searching for reassurance that authenticity could still win in a world of mockery. Every viewer felt it. The stakes had swelled far beyond two people standing under stage lights. They were watching a clash of values. On one side, a rising star convinced her sharp tongue could humiliate anyone who stood before her. On the other, a man whose journey embodied resilience, whose very presence contradicted the caricature painted of him. And so the tension thickened. The cameras zoomed in on faces, the crowd leaned forward in their seats, and commentators whispered to themselves what the nation would soon realize. that this wasn't a simple back and forth. This was about credibility, about integrity, about truth standing face to face with mockery. Leavitt leaned in with the confidence of someone who believed she had already won. Patel stood calm, silent, his stillness adding weight to the air. Each pause stretched, pulling the audience tighter into the moment. Every heart watching knew this was about more than words. Every viewer watching knew this was about more than two people. It was about the future of the narrative. And just when it seemed the night would belong to Leavitt, Patel's response began to take shape, steady and inevitable, like a storm gathering on the horizon. Karoline Leavitt's rise in politics was marked by speed, spectacle, and sharpness. Young, ambitious, and brimming with confidence, she entered the political arena armed with a tongue as sharp as a blade and a strategy built on disruption. She understood the modern media ecosystem better than most. Outrage traveled faster than nuance, and mockery captured more headlines than measured debate. And so she built her persona not around persuasion, but provocation. From her earliest appearances, Leavitt carved out an identity as the firebrand willing to say what others would not. In interviews and speeches, she wielded sarcasm like a weapon, smirking through rebuttals, dismissing opponents with eye rolls, and packaging her words to clip neatly into viral moments. She relished the role of disruptor, playing to a crowd that wanted combat rather than conversation. The louder the clash, the more attention she commanded. But with that confidence came arrogance. She seemed to thrive not just on defeating her opponents, but on humiliating them. Her brand became tied to the spectacle of takedowns, shutting down challengers with quips that made headlines, delivering lines rehearsed for maximum sting. Each victory, no matter how shallow, fueled the perception that she was untouchable, that no one could withstand her rhetorical blows. And yet, behind the smirk, lay contradictions. Leavitt painted herself as a champion of the people, yet often belittled those who dared to question her. She celebrated her ability to connect with ordinary Americans, yet her performances frequently leaned on dismissing the struggles of others. She claimed to speak for strength, but too often mistook cruelty for power. In chasing virality, she blurred the line between conviction and spectacle, substance and soundbite. For her supporters, this was exhilarating. For her critics, it was exhausting. But for Leavitt herself, it was intoxicating. Each staged takedown, each headline praising her fierce approach, reinforced the belief that her style was not only effective, but unstoppable. She became convinced that confidence alone could substitute for depth, that volume could drown out vulnerability, and that arrogance could pass as authority. This persona followed her into every setting: press conferences, rallies, debates. Opponents quickly learned that facing Leavitt meant preparing for ridicule as much as policy. She was relentless, never hesitating to cut off, interrupt, or needle her way into control of the stage. Her opponents often left looking flustered, cornered, or silenced. It wasn't always about being right. It was about dominating the moment, and she knew how to seize it. But this strategy carried a flaw she rarely recognized. By leaning so heavily on mockery and dismissal, she underestimated the resilience of those who refused to play her game. She grew so accustomed to opponents unraveling under pressure that she began to believe none could stand firm against her. The smirk became her armor, the sneer her signature. She saw every stage as her stage, every opponent as a stepping stone. And so, when Karoline Leavitt walked into the debate that night, she carried herself with the same swagger that had defined her career. She saw Kash Patel not as a man with a record, not as someone with a story, but as her next headline. She believed her words would slice through him as they had so many others. To her, it was already decided. But arrogance can blind. What Leavitt could not see was that Patel was not like the opponents she had faced before. His silence was not weakness. His calm was not hesitation. She mistook composure for fragility, dignity for passivity. In her eyes, this was just another setup for another takedown. She thought this would be just another takedown, but this time she picked the wrong opponent. Kash Patel's story does not begin under the bright lights of a debate stage. It begins with immigrant roots, parents who arrived in America carrying little more than determination and a belief in the promise of this country. They worked long hours, sacrificed comforts, and raised their children to understand that dignity wasn't inherited, it was earned. Patel grew up in a household where hard work was not a choice, but a language, one he would carry into every corner of his life. He was not born into privilege or access. He carved his way forward through persistence, through education, through service. Law school, public service, and the calling to defend his nation's security. Each step was marked by resilience. When doors closed, he found windows. When doubters tried to sideline him, he pressed ahead with quiet focus. What emerged was not the caricature Leavitt tried to paint, but a man seasoned by adversity, defined by endurance. Patel built a career not on chasing headlines, but on standing firm in the face of storms. In the intelligence community, he worked tirelessly in roles that demanded precision and composure under pressure. In the halls of power, he never sought the spotlight. He understood that true service was not about being seen, but about ensuring others were safe, about telling the truth when it was easier to remain silent. His reputation became one of resilience, calm under fire, steady when others broke under. The weight. And through it all, he never forgot the roots that shaped him. He carried the immigrant's humility, the worker's discipline, the citizen's love for country. Those who knew him spoke less about his title and more about his character. In a world of arrogance and ambition, Patel's quiet dignity stood apart. This dignity was not passive. It was strength disguised as stillness. In moments where others lashed out, Patel listened. When others chose arrogance, he chose truth. When others tried to define him, he let his record speak, standing by service members, pursuing justice, refusing to bend under political fire. He was not without critics, but his resilience was proof of a deeper foundation. This is what made the contrast on that debate stage so stark. Karoline Leavitt's words carried the edge of arrogance. Loud, mocking, performative. Patel's presence carried something else entirely. He did not need to shout. He did not need to match insult for insult. His journey had taught him that arrogance burns out quickly, but dignity endures. Audiences watching that night were not just seeing a man in a suit. They were seeing decades of sacrifice, years of service, the weight of immigrant parents, dreams, and the steadiness of someone who had lived through battles far tougher than words on a stage. They were watching the product of a journey that embodied America's promise, that truth and perseverance can outlast mockery and ambition. Patel's calm under fire was not an act. It was the culmination of every test life had thrown his way, every sneer he had endured for not fitting the mold, every late night spent working twice as hard to prove himself, every moment where he could have chosen the easy path of bitterness, but instead chose integrity. These moments had forged in him a resilience that arrogance could never match. So when Leavitt launched her attacks, when she tried to humiliate him, she wasn't facing a man unprepared. She was facing someone who had spent his life readying himself for challenges exactly like this one. She saw an opponent. He carried a lifetime of preparation. It was precisely this journey that had prepared Patel for the moment of his life. Karoline Leavitt leaned into the microphone with the confidence of someone who thought she had the upper hand. Her voice sharpened, her words landing like daggers meant to pierce. "Kash Patel wants you to believe he's credible," she sneered. "But the truth is, he's nothing more than a political errand boy. A man who hides behind titles because he's got nothing of his own to stand on." The audience reacted with a mix of gasps and murmurs. Some clapped nervously. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Leavitt pressed forward, sensing an opening. When history remembers these years, it won't remember Patel as a leader. It'll remember him as a shadow, someone who followed orders, never led. That's who he is, and that's all he'll ever be. She smirked, letting the words linger, hoping they would sink in like poison. But across from her, Patel sat motionless. His face betrayed no anger, no panic. He simply listened, his eyes steady, his posture unshaken. If Leavitt's goal was to rattle him, to draw him into her storm, it was failing. The more she spoke, the calmer he seemed. The crowd sensed the tension building, like the slow tightening of a rope. Each insult was designed to force Patel into a reaction. A snapped retort, a defensive stumble, something she could use to confirm her caricature of him. Instead, Patel gave her nothing. His silence wasn't weakness. It was pressure, bearing down on her, stretching the moment into something far heavier than she had anticipated. Leavitt's words began to speed up, each one laced with more venom than the last. You talk about dignity? You talk about service? You've been a puppet, Kash, and everyone here knows it. She gestured broadly to the crowd, trying to rally them behind her. A few clapped, but the response wasn't as loud as she'd hoped. The silence between claps echoed louder than the applause. Meanwhile, Patel's restraint was beginning to feel like a performance of its own. Every second he remained quiet, every measured breath he took amplified the anticipation. The audience leaned in, waiting for the response they knew had to come. They could feel it rising beneath the surface, like a storm gathering behind still skies. Leavitt tried again, louder this time, as if volume could mask the fact that the room was slipping away from her. You've built a career on clinging to stronger men, and without them, you're nothing. Isn't that right, Kash? Her eyes narrowed, daring him to respond, trying to bait him into anger. Still, he did not move. His silence stretched, and the weight of it shifted from defense into offense. For the first time, Leavitt faltered. Her words, once sharp, now seemed to hang awkwardly in the air, unanswered. The audience wasn't cheering her anymore. They were watching him, waiting for the moment they knew was coming. The moderator tried to interject, sensing the imbalance, but even he seemed reluctant to cut into the tension. The debate no longer felt like a back-and-forth exchange. It had become something else, a duel suspended in time, one voice firing shots, the other waiting to deliver the decisive blow. And then Patel's eyes narrowed slightly, his hand shifting, closer to the microphone. The smallest movement drew a ripple through the audience. People leaned forward in their chairs, breath caught, waiting. They had heard Leavitt's insults. They had seen her confidence. But now they wanted to know what would happen when the silence ended. And then, in a single moment, the silence broke. For a heartbeat, silence wrapped around the room. Karoline Leavitt's words still hung in the air, acidic and smug, designed to sting, to diminish, to leave Kash Patel looking small beneath the lights. She smirked, as if already certain she had won. But Patel didn't flinch. He didn't rush to respond. Instead, he let the pause grow heavier, the silence more uncomfortable, until every eye turned toward him. The duel had begun, and he was in no hurry to draw his sword. When Patel finally spoke, his tone was not sharp or angry, but measured. "Karoline," he began, the name landing like a steady anchor in turbulent waters. "You came here tonight to perform. I came here to tell the truth." The crowd shifted, sensing the pivot. Leavitt's grin flickered just slightly, as if she felt the balance tilting. Patel leaned forward, his voice firm but calm. He recited facts about his record of service, about the sacrifices his family had made, about the work he had done, when no cameras were watching. He spoke not in generalities, but in detail, every sentence a carefully placed stone in a foundation of credibility. "While you've been rehearsing one-liners, I've been defending this country. While you trade in insults, I've traded in results. Each line struck not with volume but with precision, leaving no space for rebuttal. Leavitt attempted to interject, her tone sharp, but the audience wasn't with her anymore. They wanted to hear Patel. Even the moderator held back, recognizing that something unusual was unfolding. Less like a debate, more like a reckoning. Patel paused, letting the weight of his words settle. He scanned the room, locking eyes with members of the audience, creating a connection that transcended the stage. "You think humiliation is strength," he said, his voice steady. "But I know strength because I've lived it. My family came, here with nothing. We worked every hour, every day to prove that truth is louder than arrogance, that dignity is stronger than mockery. And tonight, that story isn't just mine. It's America's." The room stirred. A low murmur spread, the kind that precedes an eruption. Leavitt's confident posture tightened. Her smirk had vanished. For the first time she looked unsettled, as though the armor she wore so easily, sarcasm, performance, arrogance, had cracked under the weight of something she hadn't expected. "Authenticity," Patel continued, building rhythm like a conductor guiding an orchestra. His words weren't rushed. They rose and fell with deliberate pacing, each phrase punctuated by silence that let the audience react. "You tried to reduce me to a punchline. But here's the truth. Every immigrant child who worked twice as hard just to stand half as tall knows what I know. Every American who sacrificed for their family knows what I know. Dignity cannot be taken. It can only be surrendered. And tonight, I am not surrendering." Applause began, scattered at first, then growing stronger, until it swelled into a wave. Leavitt's attempt to cut in was drowned out, her voice lost beneath the surge of approval, and then Patel delivered the line that turned the moment from victory into legend. He leaned back, allowed a long pause, and said softly, almost conversationally, "You tried to humiliate me, but the only person humiliated here tonight is you!" The crowd erupted, the sound crashing like thunder through the hall. Gasps, cheers, shouts filled the space. The moderator struggled to regain order, but it was impossible. The moment had transcended the debate format. Cameras zoomed in on Leavitt's face, her eyes darting, her composure fraying. She looked less like the aggressor now and more like someone who had overplayed their hand. Patel didn't gloat. He didn't need to. He simply stood there, composed, letting the roar of the audience serve as his exclamation mark. The duel was over, and he had won not with volume, but with precision, patience, and unshakable calm. What made it powerful was not just the content of his words, but the way he delivered them. He had turned debate into theater, into poetry, into a lesson in restraint and timing. Each pause sharpened his next phrase. Each fact disarmed an insult. Each appeal to shared values lifted the moment beyond the personal and into the universal. It wasn't just Patel defending himself. It was Patel defending dignity itself. The atmosphere in the room shifted entirely. What had begun as Leavitt's performance now belonged to Patel. Even those who disagreed with his politics could not deny the mastery of the moment. He had taken an attempt at humiliation and converted it into a triumph of principle. The cameras captured it all. Leavitt's fading confidence, Patel's steady gaze, the audience rising to its feet. In living rooms across America, people leaned closer to their screens, feeling as though they had just witnessed something bigger than politics. This wasn't just a comeback. It was a lesson in how truth dismantles arrogance when spoken with dignity. Patel ended not with a shout, but with a whisper that carried louder than any yell. America deserves leaders who don't confuse insults for ideas, who don't confuse mockery for strength. Tonight, I stand on this stage not to be loud but to be clear. Truth will always win. The eruption was instantaneous. Cheers, chants, applause that wouldn't end. The moderator called for order, but order was gone. The duel had ended, the audience had chosen its victor, and history had been written in real time. The room erupted. History had just been made. The instant Patel's words struck, the echo spread far beyond the room. Within minutes, clips of the exchange began flooding social media. The 30-second highlight, Patel's calm, measured dismantling of Leavitt's insult, was replayed again and again, each repost sharpening its impact. Hashtags appeared almost instantly. By Dignity Wins, Patel McDrop. Truth over Arrogance. By the end of the night, millions had seen it. By the next morning, it was inescapable. Twitter threads dissected the exchange frame by frame, pointing out the moment Leavitt's smirk faltered, the exact second Patel's tone shifted from patient to piercing. TikTok creators set the clip to dramatic music, slowing it down at the mic drop moment and flashing captions like, "This is how you respond to hate." On Instagram, Reels spliced Patel's words with quotes from historical leaders about dignity and truth, elevating a single debate rebuttal into a timeless lesson. Commentators couldn't resist weighing in. Cable news anchors framed it as the highlight of the debate, some marveling at Patel's composure, others stunned by how swiftly the tables turned. Influencers with millions of followers shared the clip not just for its political weight, but for its human resonance. A man refusing to be diminished by arrogance, standing taller in silence before delivering a reply that no one could ignore. Politicians chimed in as well. Some praised Patel publicly, framing him as the voice of reason in a chaotic landscape. Others, caught off guard by the reaction, scrambled to distance themselves from Leavitt's attempt at humiliation. The ripple effect spread into op-eds, podcasts, and late-night comedy, each platform amplifying the narrative. Patel hadn't just defended himself. He had set a standard for how dignity could outshine insult. But perhaps the most powerful responses came not from elites, but from ordinary Americans. Immigrant families shared the clip with captions like, "This is us." Veterans spoke about recognizing Patel's composure as the same discipline they had learned in service. Parents told their kids, "Watch this. This is strength." For those who had ever felt belittled, mocked, or underestimated, Patel's moment was vindication. It wasn't just about politics anymore. It was personal. On Facebook groups, in WhatsApp chats, at dinner tables, people retold the story as if they had witnessed it firsthand. The viral moment gave voice to countless unspoken experiences. Patel became more than a debater. He became a symbol, proof that truth calmly spoken can topple arrogance dressed as confidence. The noise was deafening, but beneath it was something subtler, a shift in mood. Viewers didn't just share the clip for entertainment. They held on to it for meaning. It reminded them that politics didn't have to be a theater of insults. It could be a stage where principle and composure made history. It rekindled a hunger for leaders who spoke with dignity, who refused to play by the rules of mockery. For days, the moment stayed alive. Viral content normally dies fast, but this one lingered because it wasn't just spectacle. It was a story people wanted to carry with them. It was a mirror held up to a nation weary of noise, craving a reminder that strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it waits, and then speaks with clarity. But beyond the noise online, something deeper had shifted in the national mood. In the stillness after the storm, Patel's words lingered longer than the clash itself. The room that had moments earlier crackled with tension now carried a different weight. The weight of clarity. Karoline Leavitt had set out to humiliate him, to define the conversation by arrogance and volume. Yet what remained in the air was not her insult, but his calm reply, steady and unshaken, like a stone that refuses to be moved by rushing water. Patel did not rise to meet mockery with mockery. He didn't need to. Instead, he reframed the moment into something larger than a quarrel between two figures. He turned it into a mirror for the nation. He reminded everyone watching that dignity is not weakness, that composure is not silence, that truth spoken plainly can carry more weight than 1,000 insults hurled in anger. He showed that when humiliation is wielded as a weapon, its sharpness dulls in the face of humility. For many, it was more than a debate. It was a parable of what America could be. Immigrants saw their own journey in his refusal to be reduced to someone else's caricature. Young people, disillusioned by politics as theater, saw a glimpse of politics as principle. Families who have fought to maintain their pride despite struggle felt their stories validated. In Patel's restraint, they recognized themselves, people who have had to hold steady when the world shouted over them, people who have learned that the loudest voice is rarely the truest one. The inspiration rippled outward. Clips of the exchange became not just content to be consumed, but lessons to be shared. Teachers referenced it in classrooms as proof that civility still has power. Activists used it as a rallying cry that truth can pierce through the fog of noise. Parents told their children, "See, you don't have to shout to be strong." The moment crossed boundaries of politics and ideology because its core message was universal. Arrogance falls, but dignity endures. And perhaps the greatest lesson was this: America thrives not when mockery dominates the stage, but when truth is given room to stand tall. Nations are not built on sneers and jeers. They are built on the quiet strength of people who refuse to bow their heads, even when the spotlight tries to cast them as lesser. Patel's calmness was not just personal victory. It was a reminder of what is possible for all of us. Because sometimes the world doesn't need another battle of insults. Sometimes it needs an anchor. And in that debate, Patel became that anchor, pulling the moment away from the brink of spectacle and back toward meaning. The lesson endures beyond the headlines, beyond the viral clips, beyond the fleeting storm of outrage. It endures because it is bigger than one debate. It is the truth that in every generation, arrogance will rise, attempt to humiliate, attempt to overshadow. But again and again, dignity will remain, steady and patient, waiting for its chance to speak. And when it does, the world remembers. Because, sometimes, the calmest voice leaves the loudest echo. Karoline Leavitt tried to humiliate Kash Patel, but instead, his words carved themselves into the story of our time. She came with arrogance, certain that sharp insults and smug dismissals would leave a man like Patel rattled. But the moment she tried to diminish him, she unleashed something greater than her own voice. A comeback rooted not in noise, but in truth. And history remembers truth long after the echoes of mockery fade. What we witnessed wasn't just a debate stage exchange. It was a reminder that dignity will always outlast humiliation, that calm conviction can silence arrogance, and that in America, integrity is still the loudest microphone. For countless people watching, immigrants, families, those who know what it means to work harder, sacrifice deeper, and stand taller against the odds, Patel's response was more than a rebuttal. It was validation. It said, "Your story matters, your resilience counts, your dignity cannot be erased." And that is why this moment matters. Because when arrogance tried to take center stage, dignity rewrote the script. When humiliation tried to define the narrative, truth reclaimed the spotlight. This isn't just Patel's victory. It belongs to everyone who's ever been underestimated, dismissed, or told to sit down and stay quiet. But this is only the beginning. The power of moments like this grows when we carry them forward together. So don't just watch. Be part of the story. Subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that truth will always prevail. And join a community that believes dignity is stronger than arrogance. Because the next time history is written, you won't just be watching, you'll be part of it.